The two of them rode in silence for several minutes up a more finely tended gravel path bordered by whitewashed wooden lampposts. Thick knots of pine and witchwood trees rustled in the cool breeze. "Jean," said Locke at last, "did we arrive during the festival of fucking with Komori or what?" "Well, they obviously didn't just want a bribe." "Are you sure you ought to have antagonized them to that degree?" "No, I am not sure. Forgive me, I ache across the length and the breadth of my everything, and it is distracting as all hell." "It is, I concur. Now, as for those guards," said John, "I can see three possibilities. One, they are out of their goddamn minds." "That is a splendid thought," said Locke. "Two, they're right in the head, but they were screwing around with us for their own amusement. Either of those explanations would suggest that respect for authority in these parts flew south for the winter and has not come back." Said Locke. "Well, we know Rajades is up there on a gilded pedestal as far as the world's eccentrics go, but I think we'd have heard something in the city if we were, riding into imminent peril." I agree," said John, "so that leaves a third possibility. What if they behaved like that on orders?" "You think we were being tested somehow?" "Well, we certainly weren't cold-cocked while they detained us, so I would call that our best guess for the moment." "Whatever the reason," said Locke, "it will not hurt to stay on our toes. You got your good friends close at hand?" "I am shocked and hurt that you feel the need to ask." Jean patted the saddlebag where his hatchets and a number of other weapons were currently stashed. "And should worst come to worst, you have to reckon it's easier to break out of a fortress than it is to get in." "Do I?" "Nah. Sounded comforting, though, didn't it?" The clumps of forest around them thinned out as they rode on. Locke began to spot axe-scarred stumps, as well as holes in the landscape where other trees had presumably been pulled out. Not 100 yards up the road rose the high stone walls of the fortress proper, dominating a wide plateau decorated with little but scrub grass, stumps, and holes. All the ground within bowshot of the walls had been stripped of cover, creating a killing field for any half-competent archer atop the walls. "Well," said Locke, "this is a ray of sunshine." The fortress gate was attended by another 4 guards, and they merely nodded politely when Locke waved the invitation toward them. As Locke and John passed through the gateway arch, a slender man in courtier's clothes and a brown leather overcoat appeared from behind a side door. He had his hands on Locke's horse's reins before Locke could say anything. "Welcome," said the man. "Welcome, both of you, to the Castavaru de Rajadesa, to the hospitality of Baron Rajadesa, protector and inheritor of the Grand Barony of Blessed Ashmere." "Grand and blessed it certainly is," said Locke. To whom are we?" "I am Porphyro, Jairus Porphyro, entirely at your service." "Are you the Castellan?" "No, that would be Master Scrogue. I'll introduce you shortly. No, my position here is purely temporary. I am what you might call the caretaker of the next few days' events. I am a special assistant to the Baron himself." "Ah, I see. Well, we have our invitation, of course, sir, or the guards on the path would never have passed you. You are the very last of our guests to arrive, so I presume you must be Masters Koltari and de Sartana." "We are," Locke gestured at himself and then at John. "Koltari and de Sartana, respectively." "The greatest pleasure, gentlemen." Porphyro clapped, and several boys came running, all clad in rough-spun tunics of Ashmere green. "You must have been on those horses for some time. Please feel free to stretch your legs while I show you inside." Locke bit back a wince as he more rolled than hopped out of the saddle. The muscles of his thighs felt like the strings of crossbows after several hundred rapid discharges. As Rajadesa's stable hands took the reins of the horses, Locke and John unbuckled their most important saddlebags, the weapons, the documents, and the funds, and slung these over their shoulders. The ones that contained only clothes would follow them later, and anyone prying into them would be very, very bored by the contents. He and John followed Porphyro to the end of the gateway arch, back out into the light of day, and two things immediately began fighting for Locke's bewildered attention. The first was the state of Baron Rajadesa's fortress itself. It was a fairly dull donjon in the expedient post-Theron throne style, 5 or 6 stories of old stone, with flat, unornamented buttresses. Yet atop the structure, behind the weathered parapets, rose a cylinder of dark varnished wood. It was colossal, an additional 30 or 40 feet tall, like a cask set atop a pedestal. This cylinder was divided into horizontal sections by bands of black iron, and surrounded by a framework of metal cables and supports. Equally diverting was the great bustle of activity in the courtyard of the Baron's keep. This place, in contrast to the abused landscapes surrounding the outer walls, was filled with row after row of hedges and alchemically miniaturized trees. At least a dozen men and women were running about with large baskets of oranges, picking the fruit from... No, that was not right at all. Locke blinked twice and bit the insides of his cheeks as he studied the activity more closely. The servants were hanging oranges on the hedges and the trees, working under the direction of a frantic white-haired man standing atop the steps leading to the donjon's huge front doors. Not one of the servants was joking, dallying, or so much as talking to another. All were rushing back and forth as though their lives were in peril, making a citrus grove of a garden that did not have a single actual citrus tree in it. As Locke opened his mouth to ask Porphyro, as respectfully as possible, what any of it meant, the sound of a great metal chime rang out from the bizarre apparatus atop Rajadessa's donjon. The man standing on the steps gave 3 short blasts on a whistle, and the servants with their baskets of oranges immediately halted work. They sprinted across the courtyard toward the stables. In seconds they were out of sight. "Half past the 10th hour of the morning," said Porphyro. "The Baron's viewing. Let's wait here and admire his gardens for just a moment." The Baron's special assistant restrained both Locke and John by their upper arms, his touch respectful but ever so firm. The 2 gentlemen bastards shared a quick, alarmed glance, but halted nonetheless. A small balcony, even with the highest level of windows visible on the donjon, overlooked the courtyard. A door opened behind this balcony and a man emerged, dressed in flowing ashmere green robes. He placed his hands on the balcony rail and looked down at the courtyard, then moved his head from side to side several times. After a few moments of scrutiny, he nodded, whirled, and vanished back inside. "I appreciate your cooperation," said Porphyro. "Oranges are a fine thing for a man to see on a morning like this. They're a promise of brightness and sweet things to come. Don't you agree?" "We would," said Sean. "We love oranges." "More than we can say," said Locke. "They do so brighten up the courtyard." At that moment there was a rumbling sound from atop the donjon, followed by the squeal of metal sliding on metal. Locke had to squint to be sure, but it looked as though, yes, some of the blackened iron rings in the giant cylinder were moving, rotating. What in the name of the 13 gods was that contrivance? Another deep chime sounded, and a pair of flags shot up a line next to the cylinder. They were white rectangles bisected by colored stripes, a green stripe on top and a red stripe on the bottom flag. "Ah," said Porphyro. "Well, the oranges are going away now. Perhaps you'll see them again tomorrow. Or not. At any rate, it's a clear garden for noon and apples for the evening." The servants ran back into the courtyard, fruit baskets clutched to their chests to avoid spilling any of the contents. As Porphyro resumed walking at a leisurely pace toward the donjon, the men and women who just filled the courtyard's garden with oranges began to undo their work with very serious haste. Locke cleared his throat. "Well, the Baron must import quite a few oranges." "They're ceramic," said Porphyro. "They have silk loops for hanging. It's easier for everyone this way." "Ah, but come," said Porphyro. "It wouldn't do to clutter the courtyard if the Baron should have another viewing whim. Let me introduce you to the castellan, and respectfully examine your bags to ensure that you're not carrying any unnecessary weapons." Locke sensed rather than saw Jean's sudden tension. The bigger man turned toward Porphyro, but the special assistant again restrained him with a quick and graceful hand at the upper arm. "Your security is absolutely assured," said Porphyro smoothly. "Among other things, by the archers atop the courtyard walls, whose eyes are upon us at all times, lest I should make certain hand gestures denoting an emergency." Locke scanned the parapets of the fortress walls and saw that there were indeed half a dozen alert men and women up there, armed with a mixture of recurved bows and crossbows. He swallowed what little spit he had left, put on a brittle smile, and motioned for Jean to be calm. "All of your completely unnecessary combative belongings will be treated dearly," said Porphyro. He gave Jean a comradely pat on the back and continued walking. "Weapons can lead to misunderstandings." He turned his head to favor Locke with a glance, and his voice was like a winter breeze. "Misunderstandings can be so very permanent." "We are careful men," said Locke, fighting the urge to grit his teeth. "We wish to avoid misunderstandings above all things." "Then your stay at the Castavaru de Rajadessa will be blessedly free of inconvenience," said Porphyro. "Fear nothing, gentlemen. Once you are relieved of any troublesome burdens you may be carrying, I am bound by honor and duty to be your caretaker as well." He gestured toward the very top of the donjon. "I am to you as one of those invaluable devices." Locke glanced up, thinking that he referred to the bizarre cylinder, but from their current angle he could now make up the thin dark line of a pointed iron rod reaching skyward from one corner of the roof. A celestial wrath diverter, a recent invention of the Verari artificers, said to charm the air around tall buildings and render lightning harmless. Are we in great need of such a thing, he asked. It is merely that I pride myself on foreseeing all possible eventualities, said Porphyro. Behind them, the inner and outer doors of the fortress were closed in unison, and the flat, hard sounds of heavy locks engaging echoed across the courtyard.